Booked for Murder. Hi, I'm Shannon Symonds, and I'm the author of Booked for Murder, due out in November, which is super exciting to me. I am reading the book out loud to edit my first draft. So there's going to be lots of mistakes in it and some things that I really change as time goes on before it gets the proofreader, hopefully, like next week. And I send it out to the world. So be patient with me. You're going to hear pages turn. I'm not a professional actor reading a book, but I thought it might be fun to share it with you as it progressed. So, Booked for Murder, Chapter 8, The View from Here. Xander stood at the library window sipping hot cacao that Ivy had convinced him to try. The wind gusted and rattled. A light rain dusted the glass. Ivy sat on the couch watching the fog roll in. I hope the weather clears up for the weekend. Xander joined her on the couch, leaning back, still watching the horizon. This is the Oregon coast. We need events to be successful, rain or shine. Did you know it rains 130 days a year in Oregon? Ivy asked. He laughed. Are you a nerd, geek, or geek/nerd? The library door opened. Excuse me, Xander, Anderson said. Connor's here to see you. Xander stood up. How can I help you? Connor joined them at the window, holding his police hat in his hands. Not you, sir. Her. He nodded towards Ivy. Ivy's heart fell all the way to the bottom of her stomach. I knew it. I should have left the day I arrived at Balefire. Anderson moved aside and let Connor enter the room. Connor, welcome. What do you think of our library project? Xander said. He crossed the room in 2 steps and intercepted Connor, giving him a firm handshake. Connor smiled mischievously. Ivy, is now a good time? Can you come with me? The blood was pumping hard in her ears as her mind raced frantically, searching for a reason for him to be there. She hiccuped, making Xander glance at her. She held her breath. What has our little Ivy been up to? Xander asked. Oh, nothing like that. The chief's been nagging me to get the criminal background check you requested done yesterday. I know she doesn't have her own car, so I thought if it works for you, I'll just take her down and bring her back. He flashed a white smile at Ivy. Do you have time? I promise it won't take long. I'm surprised you have to take her to the station. Isn't there a form she can fill out online? Xander asked. Because she's been living out of state, I have to get her fingerprints and send them in for the national background check. You haven't robbed a bank, have you? Xander winked at her and laughed at his own joke. She could hardly breathe. Hiccup. Ivy's gaze darted around the room. Her dreaded hiccups had Connor laughing with Xander. They think it's funny. It's not funny. Don't panic. I'm panicking. Think. Trying to act casual, Ivy smiled and said, Oh, that old background check. I completely forgot. Trying to convince them she was okay and this wasn't necessary, she attempted her best selfie smile. She raised her brows and flipped her hair over her shoulder and chuckled. Grapes, I sound like I'm out of my mind, she hiccuped. Xander won't mind if we wait. He has lots of work for me to do before the weekend. He already has my diploma and my CV. Isn't that enough? Xander looked at her with empathy and shrugged his shoulders. I've been putting the insurance agent off. They're requiring the checks, and she'll be handling my antiquarian books. Anna what? Connor asked. Old books, you know, vintage, like Anderson, Xander said. Anderson rolled his eyes. I promise, it'll be painless, Connor said. There was nothing else she could do. She continued smiling like a plastic Barbie and hiccuped twice as she picked up her backpack and followed Connor to his police SUV. Sorry, excuse me. Lovely weather we're having. The wind carried her attempt at small talk away. Connor held the passenger door open for her. I'm sorry the chief's paranoid. Honestly, I'll have you back before Xander misses you. Her mind spun as they rolled out the gates and down the winding road to town. Well, little Miss Xander fan, this is a fine mess you've gotten yourself into. Ivy studied Connor's perfect profile. If he was a menswear model, he could sell me a suit. He glanced at her. She quickly looked away and down. What were her options? If she gave Connor her fingerprints, they might be loaded in the NCIC, which would flag her, a.k.a. or also known as. Since Darlene, as planned, had served Ian with dissolution papers, she didn't think he would report her as a missing person. He'd want to clean up his mess on his own, without losing control of her inheritance. Connor stopped to let the neighborhood elk cross the road. Connor glanced at her again. so she pretended she was looking out the passenger window at the elk. I can't believe I gave up my safety for a job with Sander. Yes, I can. Oh, for cake's sake. Darlene has warned her not to trust anyone, and she hadn't listened. Her new life was like dominoes. It wouldn't take much to bring it all crashing down. Connor turned on the blinkers well before the stop sign at the bottom of the hill. He drives like my grandfather. Can I trust him? What choice do I have? Just as Connor turned onto Highway 101, Ivy reached out and touched his arm gently. Connor, before we go to the station, I need to tell you something. Can we pull over? His brows drew together in confusion, but he did it. He silently pulled over by the stone wall bordering the bay and the tomb of the unknown soldier. Turning in his seat, he looked at her with one brow raised. She leaned toward him with pleading eyes and said, Connor, I feel like you and me, we got off to a rocky start. I mean, your mother picked me up on a bus, basically took me in, and handed me the life I always wanted. You've got to wonder who I am and why I got on a bus to nowhere. Hiccup. He tipped his head and looked at her through narrowed eyes. Do I need to turn on my body cam and record this? Honestly, it's a sad story I hate telling, Ivy said. Then she had an idea, a way to give him just enough without having to go into details. I'm listening, he said. Let me show you my driver's license. She took it out of her bag and let him study it. Lottie Avenue? Lottie Avenue licenses and Lottie Lou Lane are only given to survivors of abuse. Are you a victim of domestic violence? His brows drew together while he searched his memory. Where did you get this? The DMV's 2 hours away. How did you get there? He shook his head. Would you believe I took the bus? She held her breath and watched him study the card, turning it over. He fell back in his seat. Her secret was out. It was made for me while I was still in the shelter, she said softly. He pushed a lock of black hair behind his ear, looking down at the license, then her, then back to the license. Is it legit? Yes. Are you safe in Balefire? Will your abuser come looking for you? Connor asked. I changed my name, where I live, and I have a new ID. I should be safe. As long as no one tosses me off a cliff, Ivy said. Not funny, he said, but he smiled looking at the license he was turning over and over in his hands. I'm being serious. For a smart woman, I've risked everything by taking a job with a famous author. I knew it was dumb, but I'm a major fan of his books and, well, him. Everything. My job with Sander, and people with power like the chief, you, Veronica, all put me at risk of exposure. Ivy shrugged, smiling sheepishly. Then why do you stay? Connor asked. It was her turn to smile. He put both hands on the steering wheel, and irritation flashed across his face. So let me get this straight. You've been ghosting the station because you aren't who you say you are. And if I fingerprint you, whose name is going to pop up? She shook her head no. She wasn't sharing any more information. Do you expect me to pretend I don't know about this? He held the license up, showing it to her with raised brows. Why here? Why now? Did you know that just knowing this information and not telling it to the chief to help you could permanently damage my chances of becoming a detective? Ivy shrank. Well, when you put it like that, it does sound pretty selfish. I am so sorry. He looked at her, eyes. What happened that was so bad they gave you a Lottie Lou card before you even got on the bus with my mom? He asked. His lips were pressed firmly in a straight line, and she could feel his mounting tension. Okay, I'll tell you, but please, don't tell anyone what I'm going to share. One of his brows rose. I'll decide that after I hear your story. Here goes. I was a single library geek for a long time. All my friends had someone, and went away to live their lives. I was the last one standing. I wanted to fall in love so badly, you know? She studied his blank face. I have never felt so incredibly lonely. She searched Connor's eyes. Dark, nothing, a blank slate. Meanwhile, tears were pooling in her eyes. She exhaled slowly. I married a police officer I met at the beginning of the COVID quarantine. I guess The intensity of the whole COVID thing, including the possibility of being alone and sick, made me vulnerable. I met my husband when one of my colleagues disappeared and he was assigned to the missing persons case. He was supposed to be interviewing me, but instead he asked me out for a cup of coffee. We began dating until after I found the missing man. You found him, not the officer? Connor asked. I did. You see, the missing man was a computer genius, but not smart enough to remove his desktop from his office. I used my library, research, and tech skills to find a ticket to a cruise in the Bahamas, purchased shortly before his disappearance. After it was over, my ex asked if I would go out to dinner with him so he could thank me for my help. You were part of his investigation, and he asked you out? He also didn't waste any time before asking me to marry him. I thought I was in love, for the first time in my library life. My parents weren't happy with him. I knew they were almost always right, and I should have slowed down, but I wanted what everybody else had, love, she shrugged. He listened quietly. She couldn't tell what he thought or if he judged her. Because of the divide between my parents and Ian, I avoided talking to them, and then when the COVID quarantine was going, I thought I was blissfully locked in my cozy country home with the love of my life. Instead, I was trapped with pure evil in the most dangerous place you can imagine. And then it got worse. My parents died in a hit-and-run accident when their car was hit and pushed off a cliff not far from my house. They must have been traveling to check on me. I watched their car burn. That's awful. No wonder you're so triggered by Bonnie's death. I love my mom and Jessica so much it would kill me to lose them. I've seen enough on this job to know how traumatic witnessing an accident and death like your parents is, especially if it involves someone you love. It was awful. It wasn't until after they died and I received my inheritance from my parents' estate that my ex Ian became seriously controlling and emotionally abusive. I think the research and the money was his motivation for marrying me. I tried leaving once. After that, he was afraid that I would not only leave him, but that I would take my parents' money and research with me before he could get his hands on it. Flooded with emotion, she took a jagged breath and forged on, looking down at her hands, seeing the past. Then he was accused of excessive use of force as an officer. The department tried to keep it quiet, but I knew he did it, and I told him I was leaving him. I was packing when he assaulted me and really hurt me. He threatened to kill me and commit suicide if I left him. I apologized, and I did everything I could to make him believe that I wouldn't leave, so he would let me live. You have to remember, the whole world was in lockdown. I felt totally isolated. How long did you try to make it work after that? Connor asked. Only for a few months. I must have convinced him that I would stay because he let me work at the library when it was allowed. I made all my plans to get out safely on the library computer. I found a good attorney to protect my inheritance and prepare divorce papers. He hooked me up with a shelter for battered women. Connor gave her back her driver's license. So how did you get this? He asked softly. The shelter manager is a passionate genius. She did a risk assessment. The results were off the charts. I wouldn't live if I stayed with Ian. She helped me create a whole new life. Hair, name, diploma, and yes, an Oregon Lottie Lou Lane driver's license. My plan was to go to Portland and work at PSU, and then I met your mother, and you know the rest of that story. I wouldn't want to live in a big city like Portland, especially after COVID, You're safer in Balefire, Connor said. When I met your mom on the bus, she said the same thing. Chuckled, pulled out his cell, and began scrolling through his contacts. Are you calling the chief? She made prayer hands and watched him, pleading with him to stop. No, are you kidding? He'd kill me if he knew we were even having this conversation, without letting him know immediately. He wouldn't keep your secret. He takes everything to the morning book club. Connor made a call. Hello, Lottie Lou Lane, this is Officer Flynn from the Balefire Bay Police Department. He listened for a minute and flashed a brilliant smile. Huh? He turned the card over and then back to the front. ODL 5392227. Last of Kelly, first of Ivy, middle of Olivia. There was a pause. My badge number is 61. I'm on the Balefire Bay Police Force. No, Calling the station would make it necessary for me to explain to dispatch and increase the likelihood of exposing the victim. It's a small town. He smiled and nodded, even though the woman couldn't see him. Uh-huh. Thank you. Whatever he was hearing must be funny. He laughed softly again. Okay. He put his cell phone on the dash where they could both see it. A FaceTime call came through. The black woman was smiling at her. Hello, I'm Abigail. Ivy, can you tell me your safe word? Gobstoppers. And can you tell me your social security number? Abigail asked. Ivy face-palmed herself. I didn't memorize the new one. That's okay. How about your grandmother's maiden name? Tanner, Ivy said. Yes, I can confirm. Ivy Olivia Kelly is part of our program. Can you tell me why? Where did she come from? Connor asked. The woman on the screen smiled wide and shook her head back and forth. I'm sorry. I can only confirm or deny that she lived on Lottie Lou Lane. Thanks, he said and ended the call. He took his hat off and rubbed his head, making the mess of his hair, before looking intensely into her eyes. She had to look away. Keenly aware of the risk she just took, she felt oddly at peace about sharing her secret with Connor. Does Xander know? Connor asked. No, he knows I had a bad breakup before coming here, but nothing else. I don't want him to know. He'll fire me, she admitted. I doubt it, but you realize you're asking me to lie to Xander about you. We've been friends since he came to town, and what do you think his insurance company is going to say if they find out? What if your ex shows up? Xander has the right to know. Would your ex hurt Xander or anyone else? He smoothed his hair and put his cap back on. She deflated. Just let me think for a minute. He's right. My lies could cost Xander his privacy, if not his life. I don't want anyone to get hurt or Connor to lose his job. Could helping me cost you your job? Ivy asked. Possibly, but I don't think so. It would cost me the detective's position, though. I need the chief's complete trust and to keep my local reputation as an honest, hard-working officer. Oh, yeah, that. Yep, he bounced a fist off the steering wheel. So let me see if I understand everything. You're in hiding because your ex is an abusive police officer who's threatened to kill you. As an officer, he can get access to Avis and find the record of your prints, which could link your new name to your old name as an AKA. You could be reported as a missing person at NCIC. You're in hiding, and yet you're choosing to work for a very famous best-selling author who was on the front page of the New York Times recently? Yeah, that about sums it up. It sounds bad when you say it that way. I just couldn't pass up the opportunity to work with Xander. He rolled his eyes. I can think of a few reasons why you should have walked away. She nodded and wiped one tear. I am so sorry. Ivy closed her eyes, pushing her feelings back in their place. Okay, let's go get fingerprinted. I guess I could delay the inevitable by a few days. I have no way of knowing if you're telling me the truth. But Mom's an excellent judge of character. She likes you, and my gut says your story is too bizarre to be a lie. And then there's the confirmation from Lottie Lou Lane. Connor paused, looked away, and cracking his knuckles. Finally resolute, he turned toward her. There are some benefits to living in a small town that's still using old radios and paper for reports. But you have to know, this could land me in serious trouble. I understand. I doubt you do. This better stay between the two of us and Xander. He deserves to know. You tell him, or I will. He turned the key and eased the police SUV back on the road. Ivy studied him. Is he for real? Can I trust him? As if he read her mind, he flashed her a sincere smile. She tried to smile back, but was sure she looked more like she had to vomit. Connor parked behind the station and let Ivy in through the back door. She followed him down a carpeted corridor. The left side of the hall had a series of interview rooms. Lockers lined the right wall. Connor expertly unloaded his gun and put it in a gun locker. Then he did the same with a small gun that had been strapped to his ankle. He pulled a third gun out of a chest holster. You have got a lot of gun jewelry. He laughed. I'm a high-maintenance man. Smiled with a brilliance that ran a shiver straight down her spine. This way. He walked her back to one of the interview rooms. He left for a moment and returned with forms. Is this the room you use for interrogating suspects? She filled out the first line. Can I use your mom's address for mail? Use your driver's license address and have Lottie Lou Lane forward it to my P.O. Box, number 7. I get my mail sent to the station. How does Lottie Lou Lane mail work? Well, all my mail goes to Lottie Lou Lane. They package it up and once a week forward it to a P.O. box or a package drop that I set up from my real residence. This background check form asks for my also known as names and everywhere I've lived for the past 5 years. Will this link my new name to my old one? I'll do some digging and find out. I might call Lottie Lou back and ask more questions or for advice, Connor said. Okay, well, let's get this over with. Ivy handed Connor the signed forms. He gathered her paperwork, which included a blank fingerprint card. She followed him into a narrow hallway that ended with a jail cell. There was a small workstation with a breathalyzer and all the equipment he needed for prints. He rolled each finger separately, badly smudging 3 fingers on the card. Hey, won't they just send it back and make you do it all over again? She asked. He grinned and his eyes twinkled. He looked around to make sure they were alone and said quietly, yes, they'll send it back for us to do it all over again. First, I delay mailing it as long as I can. It takes 10 days to get to them. They send me a notice to do it again, and I get around to doing it when I'm good and ready. Ivy grinned. Thank you. You're saving my bacon. My ex had me convinced that every officer was just like he was. It's nice to know he was wrong. So, I'm Shannon, the author, and I just thought I'd tell you a little bit about this little section and kind of the things that inspired it. I got to get to know all of the officers that worked in our county at one time, and for many years did ride-alongs with them, and I still think of most of them as my friends, and I have the deepest respect for them. But every once in a while, there was an officer that had domestic violence happening at home. And when you're a survivor, man, it's like almost impossible to hide. You have somebody who has access to everything that can identify where you live, the whole 9 yards. And so the state of Oregon kind of has this cool program. It's not Lottie Lou Lane. It's a different name, and you can look it all up online on Google. But when you're a survivor, if you qualify and an advocate helps you and all of the things go through victims assistance, everything's right, they will give you a driver's license that has this same address as all of the other survivors have. And your mail is forwarded to that address or sent to that address. That you put that down as your address. And then they do send it back out to you. And I've seen it work beautifully. The nice thing about it is when you get pulled over, it's really a family. I guess just like any job, everybody knows everybody. Everybody cares about everybody. Or maybe like a church where everybody knows everybody and everybody cares about everybody. And it's awfully tempting, for one person to tell the other, hey, guess who I saw today? And so when you have a license that has that protected address on it, it doesn't show anything else in the police computer. It's protected information. And it's kind of a brilliant piece of work that was put together to protect survivors, men, women, children, all of them. So I think that's kind of cool. I think we do some really neat things that maybe you don't hear about. I know it seems like there's not a lot of domestic violence, but truthfully, I wish there was less. I think there can be less. And I think COVID was so hard. And I'm sure for people that I was working with at the time and for people that I've known before. And, isolation is a big part of emotional abuse, physical abuse. It's what kind of perpetuates it. So I guess what I want to leave with you today is if you know somebody and you think something's going on, do your best to be kind because they already feel like garbage. They already feel like they don't belong. They are already isolated. They probably are already dying of loneliness. And they're judging themselves 10 times harder than you are. I guarantee it. I'm sure of it. And then when we come along and look at them sideways, they're sure that we're thinking bad things about them because everybody's telling them what's wrong with them, or at least their partner is. The survivors that I've worked with, some of them are the most incredible people. If I told you how many achievements they've made, you wouldn't believe me. you would just say, well, how did she get involved in that? Well, it's easy. It's easy. Not because there's something wrong with her, but because people that abuse other people choose someone who has some quality that they lack, that they know they don't deserve, and then they begin to try to control them. And so there's a really great book by Dr. Evan Stark. He's a good researcher if you want to know more about it. But, the bottom line is don't judge. Don't judge. You never know when it's going to be your daughter, your friend, your sister. And just, do your best to keep an open mind and an open heart and to love people where they are and where they're at. And that includes the people that need mental health help for being abusive. So I think when we see each other deeply, when we get to know each other, it's hard to hate people that you know. And it's hard to judge people when you really get to know what's going on. And we are worth getting to know. I remember a time in my life during a bad divorce when, and I won't name names or years or anything, but law enforcement helped me move. That's how I ended up at the beach. And I would have all my mail sent to another city and drive over, and nobody knew. I had a second husband, I had a happy family, and all the years that my kids were in school, nobody had any idea that I wouldn't allow their pictures to be in the paper, that my name was nowhere on a utility bill, that everything had to be very carefully offline. And my kids thrived in this wonderful town that I live in. They became football captains and cheerleaders and a swim team, soccer, and were loved by the local people because nobody knew. And when they got older, it was the first time I told a few people that they were adopted by my second husband, that my first husband allowed that. And they were shocked that they weren't his, because they'd always tell me, gosh, they look so much like their dad. So I have felt pretty passionately over the years, and every chance I get, I will tell you that don't judge, don't guess. Just know that people that survive have done some pretty amazing things to get there. And it may look bad from the outside, but on the inside, they know what to do. They know their story better than anybody else. So if you want to know more about that, you can get on the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence or the National Hotline, and they have a lot of statistics and research and what you can do and say to support others. So that's all my spiel, and I won't go on and on. I will tell you that if you're going to run away and hide, you should do it at the beach, because there is no better place on the planet to heal, and there is no better place on the planet to play and to laugh and to remember how to have fun after life's been tough. And even in the tough moments I have now, thank heavens I'm here, because I don't know where you are. Isn't it a gift to go outside someplace beautiful and just catch your breath? Well, it is. And it's especially a gift to be able to go outside someplace beautiful with someone you like or with good friends. So sometime this week, be kind to somebody that you're not really sure about. Be kind to each other. Get to know each other. And I hope you go outside and have fun.